Hello again, it's me, Mandala, and I'm here again to share another open world PvE build. This time I'm sharing a new Reaper build that has become a lot more potent since the changes of from the November balance patch. And so this is a death magic Condi, it's really a hybrid Condi Reaper build for open world play. And so let's get into it. So the first thing is the equipment, and what you're going to be running is, again, pretty standard for most of these open world builds, is just full celly everything. So full celly armor, full celly weapons, full celly trinkets, right? And then for the weapons, you're going to be running staff and greatsword. And then for the armor runes, you're going to be running Superior Rune of the Crate for bleed duration. And then you're going to be running Relic of the Reaper as your relic. And so we'll get into why that matters and why we're doing all this in just a second. Last thing, for the sigils, you're running Superior Sigil of Strength and Superior Sigil of Celerity. And I'll say that you don't necessarily need the Superior Sigil of Celerity, but I think for ease of use, this is just the best rune, the best sigil, I mean, to put on your weapons. In this case, to make sure that the build, plays smoothly in general play, especially when you're not versing a large quantity of enemies. So, as far as traits go, the first trait line we're running is Spite, and so we're taking Bitter Chill, so all our chilling applies Vuln. We're taking Chill of Death because these other two are terrible on any build that does Condi damage, so this is just the least of all evils. And then we're taking Dread to maintain quickness uptime and fury uptime whenever we fear an enemy. So that's going to be a big part of how this build plays, along with Bitter Chill. And so other things about this line you should know is that it makes Reaper Shroud 1, so your auto attack and Reaper Shroud grant might. You do extra vuln on low health enemies, and you also get might on low health enemies. Secondly, and this is the interesting change that I wouldn't necessarily have recommended before this patch, but with some buffs to this trait, Deadly Strength, this trait line is actually really powerful in open world specifically, and so I'm going to explain why that is. So, firstly, this build is all about building up a special mechanic called Death's Carapace, and so this gives you toughness, and if you have Deadly Strength traded, it also gives you power and condition damage, and you can get up to 30 stacks of it. So that's why you'll start to see that when we build this up in open world play, we become very tanky and get a lot of potent offensive stats as well on Condi builds. And so for this trait line, I'll just explain what the traits are. So Putrid Defense, this is going to increase our poison damage, and we're going to get Carapace stacks from poisoning enemies. We already talked about Deadly Strength, which gives us power and condition damage based on our Carapace stacks. And then we're also taking Corruptor's Fervor, which inflicts a condition on foe, grants Carapace, right? So anytime we inflict a condition on a foe, we get another Carapace stack. And if we're above a certain threshold of Carapace stacks, which is 25, which is really high, but you'll see why that is actually maintainable, we get permanent protection uptime, right? So we get four and a quarter seconds protection on a 3-second interval, which basically means if we can keep our Carapace threshold above 25 the majority of the time, we have permanent protection. And if you can keep your stacks close to 30, you also get, so in addition to permanent protection, you also get 300 power, 300 condition damage, and then 600 toughness, because you get 20 toughness per Carapace stack. So that's why this trait line is so powerful. For the miners, you get Carapace when you enter Shroud here. For Soul Compression, your passive life force generation is increased, and when you enter Shroud, you gain life force based on your Death's Carapace. So this kind of makes up for the fact that we are not taking the staff symbol, the staff mark life force generation in the soul magic or whatever. What's it called? It's called a soul reaping line. Um, that makes up for that life force loss. And then you also have Beyond the Veil, which means takes reduced condition damage while at or above the threshold of Carapace stacks, which is only 10. So we take 10% reduced condition damage as well, which is really nice. And then finally for the Reaper trait line, sorry that I'm being long-winded, but there's lots of parts to this build that are very interesting, which is why I wanted to explain it. Lastly, for the Reaper line, you're taking Chilled Nova, which gives us chill, right, which interacts very well with our other stuff. We're taking Soul Eater for passive sustain and a little extra damage, and I've tested both these other ones, and they might seem better but they're just not for open world play. You just want this passive sustain. It's very valuable, and the damage differential between Soul Eater and Decimate defenses isn't actually that high. I actually think Soul Eater actually still does more damage, depending on what your setup is. So I still recommend taking Soul Eater here, and I still recommend running Superior Sigil of Strength over Chilling Victory, because again, you're just losing too much passive sustain by not taking Soul Eater. And then finally, we're taking Deathly Chill, which this is the cornerstone of the whole build, which is chill deals damage over time, right? So it applies, and it doesn't really deal damage over time. It's just when you chill a foe, it applies bleed stacks. And so the whole build is centered around chilling, applying vulnerability, and bleed stacks, and that's how we're doing a majority of our damage. So right, so chill applies vuln, we chill when we crit, when we chill we apply bleed, our, and if we go back to our relic, our shouts apply bleed because they apply chill, and then a lot of our weapon skills apply chill. So that's part of how this works. And because it's a hybrid build, you still get benefits from using these powerful power weapons, staff and greatsword. Staff's more of a hybrid. It doesn't really have a role, honestly. Staff's kind of weird, but greatsword is a power weapon, but it works well with this build still because it applies chill on some of its abilities, and because it's just a fun weapon to use. So I like to use fun weapons when we do stuff like this. So next up, I'm going to talk about utilities. So for utilities, I take mostly the shouts. So the key one is Chilled to the Bone, which is huge stability, might, fury, quickness, vuln, chill, defiance bar break. It's just a very powerful skill, and you should be taking it in almost all scenarios. On Reaper, it's just very powerful now with a 30-second cooldown. I'm also taking Nothing Can Save You for Boon Rip, unblockable procs for your attacks, vuln up time, and just it applies chill with the shouts. Next I'm taking You Are All Weaklings for Might Generation, weakness, damage, stun break. Again, just another good shout that works well with this build. Then I'm taking Spectral Walk, which is a stun break plus condition removal, sorry, and swiftness uptime in case you just want uh, to move around fast, right? If you want swiftness on this build, this is permanent swiftness if you just use it off cooldown, so that's good to have. And then lastly, the heal skill, Your Soul Is Mine. We gain life force per hit, and again, it's a chill. It's works with the shout synergy to apply chill. So now quickly, I'm going to get into how the build plays. So I'm just going to demo it on the Golem real quick, and I'll say first off that this build doesn't play well on the Golem. It's actually kind of tricky to execute on the Golem, but you'll see why that doesn't matter, because in open world, it's a lot smoother and a lot more fun and a lot more powerful. So I'm just going to demo it on the Golem just so you can see, and then we'll go and do some more stuff. So pay attention to how we're going to have permanent might, we're going to have permanent fury, we're going to have permanent protection, permanent vuln stacks basically, and Death's Carapace stacks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the stats panel over here, just so you can see the stats. So notice how we already have like 2700 toughness, and so just watch how these numbers fluctuate with Death's Carapace, and you'll see that our stats are just really high on this build, and our tankiness and survivability is very good, and the damage will still be pretty decent as well. So I'm gonna get into it real fast. Okay. so there you go, about 13.4. I've hit as high as 14K with this current setup. You can also do things to get more damage. You can trade a spectral walk for like a well or something to do more damage. You can trade nothing can save you as well for a well if you want to do more damage. Utilities are pretty flexible. If you're having there's some things you can do on this build to make it a little safer. If you're having trouble with conditions, even with Spectral Walk, you can take Shrouded Removal. If you're not having trouble with conditions and you're having trouble with Life Force generation, you can take Spectral Armor, which will just make you stack Life Force as you take damage, which is pretty interesting, which I can show you kind of why that's
Use
interesting.
the console to begin
quick.
combat testing.
So
If
we
you
put
have
this
any
on moderately
inquiries,
threatening,
come speak to me.
and we have max life force. So if I go in Shroud, I'm taking damage, right? You see how quickly my life force is draining. But if I have spectral armor, I come in here and I press spectral armor, and then I go in Shroud, you'll see it kind of just self-sustains for a little bit. So you at least get that buffer initially from that ability. And also if we pair that with the damage reduction in Shroud with the Shroud 3, then we basically just don't lose uptime, and then we're even generating some with our auto attacks here during this period. So there's lots of ways you can adjust this build. You can also trade this for, like, if you need, I don't know why we're still in combat. Okay, if you need CC or you need to group enemies, you can take Spectral Grasp, which pulls people, and it says it's like it's 1200 range, so it like targets one thing and then pulls everything that it hits. It just like sends out a bunch of hands. There's 5 hands and pulls them all to you. So this is a good skill to take if you don't need the Connie Cleanse. Uh, you can also put it in this spot, because again, this is just general quality of life, just another shout we can put here, just because I think wells are kind of boring and they interact poorly with some of our combo fields. But yeah, so another thing that I didn't mention is that this build requires you to use Fear and CC to generate quickness. So the skills that do this are our Staff 5, Reaper's Mark, outside of Shroud, Grasping Darkness, and then in here we're going to actually flip Infusing Terror and use Terrify pretty much off cooldown to get quickness uptime, and that's one of our main sources of quickness, as well as Chill to the Bone. Based off this dread trait. But what's interesting is that if you're in open world and you're actually killing enemies, then your Shroud 3 will keep resetting, so you can keep continuously activating it, and so our access to quickness and fury is much higher in true open world encounters. So something to keep in mind. But as you saw, decent damage, very tanky. We could do this whole fight with this moderate thing pulsing and it'd be pretty good damage. We should actually just do that. Enemy, please spell my golem. Alright, so I'm going to do it with this thing just to show you that it is tanky. And you see our damage actually increased because I guess I just played it better. Who knows? Probably just better combos, didn't cancel anything. Who knows why it's higher, but it was a little higher there with the damage pressure, maybe because I started with staff. But yeah, So you can see it's very tanky, very survivable, and it's even more so in actual encounters. So the next thing I'm going to do is, instead of doing like a typical uh, open world demo, I'm gonna do a fractal at a low level, because this is going to simulate what this feels like in true like open world. Uh, what I like to think about is like a tier 1 fractal kind of simulates the hardest scenarios you'd be in open world, because open world doesn't actually have that much difficult stuff going on for the most part on these super tanky builds, but this kind of simulates it in a fair way with multiple enemies, which you don't get often, and it's hard to find places to test that. So we're gonna do the at least part of the molten boss tier 1, just to show you how this build works when there's lots of enemies around. So again, the key is to make sure we're fearing enemies and using our infused terror and terrify uh, stuff to make sure we're getting quickness, because Reaper without quickness feels terrible, and any build that's recommending Reaper without quickness is awful, and I hate it. But yeah, so we're going to go through this a little bit, and you're going to see how this kind of works. So I don't think there's that much Condi pressure on tier 1, so I'm going to switch this to Spectral Grasp, and you're going to see how powerful this is. So just... And I'm not even comboing very well, because part of the thing is you want to make sure you use Shroud 5 into Shroud 4 to get the chilling bolts, to get a lot of chill stacks.
Don't ask me that. Not now. You and your friends just need to get us out. Okay.
So you can see our carapace stacks stay pretty high, especially when we're in a group of large enemies, and we can keep resetting the fear procs. Same with quickness and fury. And might dips when we're out, and protection dips when we're out of combat, but they come back when we start fighting things. Again, I'm just used to Power Reaper, where you don't necessarily use the 5 all the time, so it's I'm not comboing very well. But you can see how quickly everything's dying, and we're really not taking any damage because we're just so tanky. We're just impossibly tanky. And so the reason I'm sharing this build is because, like, even though like I still prefer the power, the just like no tankiness power build a little better than this one, but I just saw people sharing kind of bad sustain builds, like ones with like they're like generating no might, and it's like, how is this even a good build if I don't have any might generation and the healing's terrible too? So I just wanted to share this build, which does all the offensive things and defensive things to the best of its ability, right? You have protection, you have might, you have fury, you have quickness, you have good stats, and you do decent damage. It's not like the highest damage you're ever going to see, but it's decent damage, and you're not going to feel like you have to be kiting everything all the time. And so here's where we're going to see the build shine, is in this fight right here. Is like, anyone who's does fractals with pugs knows how like awful this fight can be when people aren't you don't have a good healer, or etc, etc. There's lots of reasons why this fight can be kind of stressful, but on this build it's like a non-issue. And again, this is tier 1, so take it with a grain of salt, but just know, like, we don't have to care about anything these bosses are doing, because we're just that tanky. And I'm dodging stuff, but like, you have stab stacks for the majority of the time on this build, so you actually and stun breaks outside of Shroud, so you actually don't need to dodge stuff necessarily, at least on tier 1. And you see it's dying pretty quick. So you can see it's versatile. It's good in sticky situations. It's decent at solo encounters, but that's not where it shines. It shines in these big mobs of enemies, right? So again, I should probably time this stuff a little better, but it's okay. I'm showing how it's a versatile build where you don't have to press everything in the perfect order every time, and it'll still work, which is good. And like you can see, you could probably drop the Sigils of Celerity because we generate infinite quickness when we're in big groups of mobs, I mean. But I still like it just because it means that when you're doing single target stuff, you don't get slowed. So we gotta wait for this. Yay. As you can see, we're just never under damage threat at all in this fractal, and this is not the case on most builds. Most builds, you would be struggling here if you just tried to face tank everything in a big group of mobs. I'm actually gonna grab the Smith's Lock so that I can have stuff at the beginning of this fight. So yeah, you can see how this build it'll do what it's doing here in the Fractal in open world just as well. I just think this Fractal is a good demo of the strengths of this build, so, and the versatility. So we're gonna do this fight, and then we might do a Heart of Thorns Hero Point just to like prove that the build is good, just because I feel like people be like, "Oh, that's tier 1 Fractal. Tier 1 Fractals are so easy, man." It's like, yes, they're very easy when you're in a group of 5. They're still easy solo, I won't lie, but this one first. You see, we can just kind of face tank everything, especially in Shroud, because we have Protection, and we have Shroud, and we have Carapace. So our damage reduction is actually insane, and the only thing we need to be concerned about is that our life force generation isn't necessarily amazing, and so we want to avoid burning our life force for no reason, but from a survivability perspective, we're just incredibly tanky. And our damage is decent. Yeah, I just didn't see any good builds for this kind of playstyle on Reaper, and so, like, some people weren't even offering open world Reaper builds, which I think is crazy, because I think the spec is just beyond broken for open world right now. And you can see 30 Carapace stacks is very easy to generate outside of Shroud. In Shroud, it's a little harder to maintain it, but it's fine. In Shroud, you're a lot tankier anyway. It's kind of fun that you're not always max capped, because it means that it rewards good gameplay. Yeah, you can see this Fractal is not pushing us at all. We have infinite boons. We're doing decent damage. We've basically never seen our health bar below like 20. Not even 25, really. So there's a Molten Boss. It's actually an okay Fractal. I hate how long and boring it is in group play, but for solo it's actually kind of interesting, I guess. It's one I hope they remove if we eventually get to the point where we have more Fractals than 25, but yeah. So this is how it plays. This would be how it plays in open world, and so just finally, as a last little thing, I'm going to show you. Hold on. I think I have to. Yeah. To go to Mistlock first. I'm going to show you a Heart of Thorns hero point just to be like, yes, this does do damage. It does do damage and works in actual open world. I'm not a fibber. I'm not lying to you. But yeah, I just saw some really trash builds. Like I'm not gonna lie, I saw some really trash Reaper builds being recommended for open world play on some platforms. So I wanted to share I wanted to share one that's more survivable and tanky, so that people have something to play. That's not gonna, like, I don't know. I saw some people running some builds that were like not actually that tanky, not actually that good at healing, and it didn't do any might or fury or damage, and it was running unfun weapons all at the same time. I was like, I don't know, guys. I don't know about this one. It's people who are normally like very good at buildcraft too. I was like very surprised at how bad the build was. But yeah. So we're just gonna do the classico. Hopefully I can respawn it. Alright, should be good. Let's see. Should do this champion chalk lobber. You can see we're just face tanking it because we can. I mean, you could dodge things if you want, and you should. You should dodge things, right? We should be playing. We should be trying to play the game actually, but you don't have to. And yeah, the only thing that makes me sad about this build is that it'd be like 400 times better if they didn't delete signets. So the Signets of Suffering version of this would be absolutely insane bonkers. Like, it'd be the only build I'd recommend playing to anyone ever, would be this Signet build version of this. So just one trait change in the spite line, and then you run the Signets, and yeah, we just got stunned there. But you can see, it just doesn't even phase us. Like, this boss, if you're not being careful, will actually kill even some very strong and powerful open world and story builds. But on this build, it's just can't even phase us. It's not even a problem at all. And the damage is decent. It's better than some of the other builds I've recommended in terms of damage, and it's better survivability, and it's very fun because you're playing basically Power Reaper but with Condi stats, with Condi damage. The only thing that's hard about it is making sure that you can maintain quickness uptime by actively using your fear skills, right? So the Reaper Mark, and actively using Infused Terror to fear. But again, just very strong build. I just didn't see any builds I liked for this kind of Reaper gameplay. I still think it's more fun just to go full Berserker and just Power Reaper and just spin to win and do infinite damage. But if you needed something more tanky, you wanted to be more survivable, you wanted something more versatile that's going to help you do harder content easier without having to be very good at the game, this build will do it for you. So anyway, this is the Death Magic Reaper, Death's Disciple, I like to call it. And so yeah, this is a Reaper build I would recommend to anybody really. It's very powerful, very strong, very versatile. It'll grow with you. Hopefully they don't nerf it into the ground. We'll see. I think this change to Deadly Strength was really big in terms of damage potential. I think it moved this build up like almost. I don't want to say 3K, but it was like 2K damage difference from what I was testing before. Because earlier this Death Magic line was good before, but it was just like you just felt like you weren't doing any damage. But now this build does a lot of damage. So anyway, this is Condi Hybrid Reaper. Very tanky Death Magic Reaper. Play this build. Don't play the ones I was seeing online. Okay, don't play those. They're very bad. They're very bad. I hate to say that because a lot of times they're really good. A lot of times the other builds I see are actually really good. They're just not my style. But this time, the Reaper build I didn't like the Reaper builds I was seeing for this patch. So anyway, here's Reaper. See you next time. Bye.